Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Books for Us. It's been a while since I've done a proper review, and I thank you all for joining me today. So today we're going to talk about The New Wilderness by Diane Cook. It's a dystopian ecological disaster novel, and it was shortlisted for the 2020 Man Booker Prize. So that's always exciting, and I just finished it. So yeah, I'm excited to get into this. Before I give a quick synopsis, I'm going to quickly review how I do reviews here. As I mentioned, I'll start with a synopsis. Then I will tell you where I rate it amongst my four categories, which are see for yourself, recommend, highly recommend, and holy shit, you need to read this book right now. See for yourself, obviously being the lowest, because I really believe that's the lowest criticism I can provide as someone who's never released any work myself or whatever. You know, moving on. I will then read a quick excerpt, and then you can get on with your lives. As always, when I do a review, the book will be available to the first person who emails me at booksforuspod@gmail.com. If you show interest, if you email me, if you actually listen to the thing, to this, first person to do it, I will send you the book. There are a few conditions which we can speak about when you email. Anyways, without further ado, let's get going talking about The New Wilderness by Diane Cook. Bea, or Beatrice, her daughter Agnes, and her husband Glenn live in an apartment in the overcrowded city. The smog and filth of the city is rampant. Children, including some of Agnes's friends in her building, are succumbing to the effects of low air quality left and right. 5-year-old Agnes is ill, and if she continues in the city, she will likely not survive. Glenn, an important professor, secures funding for a study. A small group of people from the city will attempt to live in the wilderness state, the large territory consisting of the only remaining wilderness in the world. This might be the only shot for small Agnes, to live in the only known place in the world where the air is still breathable. The three, Bea, Glenn, and Agnes, along with 20 others, approximately, leave the city and form a community in the wilderness state to try their hand against the wild elements. The challenge of existing in the wilderness state is great and made more difficult by the stringent rules thrust upon them by the wilderness state rangers. On top of facing the elements, the community must leave no trace, never camp anywhere for more than a few days, and move around the massive territory according to the will of the rangers. The New Wilderness is a story of survival, abandonment, love, and at the same time, a stark warning for things to come for us. Things that could come. Imagine this is our world. Imagine we don't have the luxury of being in nature because so little is left. Imagine never having seen a tree because everywhere is city. That's the world that Diane Cook paints for us. I'll start by saying The New Wilderness was a notable book of the year for the Washington Post and a best book of the year for NPR and BuzzFeed. As I mentioned before, it was shortlisted for the 2020 Booker Prize, formerly the Man Booker Prize. If you're not familiar, the Booker Prize is international and awarded to one fiction novel yearly. As I understand it, the prize is only considered for English language books, but there is an international Booker Prize, its sister prize, where books of other languages can be selected as the winner. It's a huge honor just to be considered for the long list is an honor, and this one, as I said, was shortlisted, so clearly it was held in high esteem amongst the Booker Prize panelists, who consist of writers, librarians, editors, people who know books. And a lot of what I read comes from these lists because I find that they curate really good fiction. So as I mentioned before, I just finished this book about an hour ago, and I'm a sucker for anything that reminds me that we are terrible creatures who are destroying our planet. But don't worry, this book really isn't preachy. It's more focused on the human aspect and the survival aspect and how things could look when resources have dwindled, how things could look for us. It's more focused on our survival than it is a slap on the wrist for our behaviors. Oddly enough, the copy I got seemed to have had some printing issues, Many words were missing one letter, and at first I thought maybe it was part of the book, but I don't think so. It was an interesting experience. Has nothing to do with my review. I just thought it was weird and interesting. And if someone gets my copy, you'll see what I'm talking about. Anyways, as far as the rating, as always, I'm indecisive. I'm indecisive and having trouble picking between two. I cannot decide between recommend and highly recommend. There were times I was completely engrossed in the story, and many of the passages were written beautifully. Most characters had a pleasing amount of complexity, as did the story. I know the three of you are sitting on the edge of your seats waiting for my pious judgment, so I won't delay any longer. I'm going to go with a recommend for this one. All right, as per usual, I will read a short excerpt just to provide you with a preview to see if the book catches you. I think I also just like pretending to be a narrator. I think it's really fun. I do not have any rights to this book, nor do I have permission from Diane Cook or HarperCollins. Anything I read to you, you can read on a preview on Google. This is not giving away any trade secrets here. So here are the first few pages of The New Wilderness by Diane Cook. Part 1. The Ballad of Beatrice. The baby emerged from B the color of a bruise. B burned the cord somewhere between them and uncoiled it from the girl's slight neck, and though she knew it was useless, swept her daughter up into her hands, tapped on her soft chest, and blew a few shallow breaths into her slimy mouth. Around her, the singular song of crickets expanded. B's skin prickled from heat. Sweat dried on her back and face. The sun had crested and would, more quickly than seemed right, fall again. From where B knelt, she saw their valley, its secret grasses and sage. In the distance were lonely buttes, and closer, mud mounds that looked like cairns, marking the way somewhere. The caldera stood sharp and white on the horizon. B dug into the hard earth with a stick, then a stone, then hollowed and smoothed it with her hands. She scooped the placenta into it, then the girl. The hole was shallow and her baby's belly jutted from it. Wet from birth, the little body held on to coarse sand in tiny golden buds brittled from their stems by the heat of the sun. She sprinkled more dust onto the baby's forehead, pulled from her deer-hide bag several wilted green leaves, and laid them over the girl. She broke off craggy branches from the surrounding sage, laid them over the distended belly, the absurdly small shoulders. The baby was a misshapen mound of plant green, rust-red blood, a dull violet map of veins under wet tissue skin. Now, the animals who had sensed it were converging. In the sky, a cyclone of buzzards lowered as if to check on the progress, then uplifted on a thermal. She heard the soft thread of coyotes. They wove through the bloomy sage. A mother and 3 skinny kits appeared under jaggedly thrown shade. B heard whines eased from their impressive yawns. They would wait. A wind stirred and she breathed in the dusty heat. She missed the stagnant scent of the hospital room where she'd given birth to Agnes, what must have been 8 years ago now. The way the scratchy gown had stretched across her chest and gotten tangled up when she tried to roll to either side. How the cool air blew around her hips between her legs where her doctor and nurses stared, prodded, and pulled Agnes from her. She'd hated the feeling, so exposed, used, animal-like. But here, it was all dust and hot air. Here, she had needed to guide the small body. Had she been 5 months pregnant, 6, 7, out with one hand, while with the other she'd had to block a diving magpie. She had wanted to be alone for this. But what she wouldn't have given for a probing gloved hand, stale recirculated air, humming machines, fresh sheets under her rather than desert dust, some sterile comfort. What she wouldn't have given for her mother. Bee hissed at the coyotes. "Scram," she said, pitching the dirt and pebbles she just dug at them. but they only slid their ears back, the mother sinking to her haunches and the kit sniffing at her snout, irritating her. She probably snuck off from the rest of the pack to get her young something extra, or to let them practice scavenging, to practice surviving. It's what mothers did. Bee shooed a fly from near the baby's eyes, which at first had looked startled over having not made it, but now seemed accusatory. The truth was, Bee hadn't wanted the baby. Not here. It would have been wrong to bring her into this world. That's what she'd felt all along. But what if the girl had sensed Bee's dread and died from not being wanted? Bee choked. This is for the best, she told her. The girl's eyes clouded over with the clouds that rolled overhead. During one night walk, back when she'd had a flashlight and still carried batteries to make it glow, she'd caught two eyes gleaming in her beam. She clapped her hands down to scare the eyes, but they just dipped down. The animal was tall but crouching, sitting perhaps, and Bee feared it was stalking her. Her heart sped up, and she waited for the cold dread that she'd felt a couple times by then. Her inner sense of being in danger. But the feeling never came. She walked closer. Again, the eyes dipped down supplicant, like a dog obeying, but it was not a dog. She had to get closer before she could see that it was a deer with its sloped back, the peaked ears, the resigned flick of the tail. Then Bee saw another eye in the light, small, not looking at her, but quivering, unsteady. The deer heaved up, and then the quivering eye wobbled up too. It was a small, glistening fawn on shaky toothpick legs. Bee had unknowingly witnessed a birth. Quiet, in the dark. Bee had come stealthily upon the mother like a predator, and the mother could do nothing in that moment but lower her head as though asking to be spared. There were few things Bee let herself regret these days, these unpredictable days full of survival so plain and brute. But she wished she had walked another way that night, not found their eyes in her light, so that the doe could have had her birth, nuzzled and licked her baby clean, could have had the chance to give her baby a first unblemished night before the work of survival began. Instead, the doe lumbered away, exhausted, the fun stumbling after her, disoriented, and that was the beginning of their life together. It's why, days ago, when Bee no longer felt the kicks and hiccups and flutters and knew the baby had died, she knew she'd want to be alone for the birth. It was the only moment they would have together. She did not want to share that. She did not want someone watching her own complicated version of grief. All right, I'm gonna stop right there while it's nice and light, right? I hope you guys enjoyed some story time. Hopefully you sat, crisscross applesauce and had a juice. That sounds lovely. Capri Sun. That would be great. Never enough in that little bottle. I really do like reading those excerpts to you. I feel like I'm a teacher doing the voices for a kid. But anyway, yeah, that's all for today, guys. Again, today's book was The New Wilderness by Diane Cook. It's going to make a great movie if it's made into one. So read it now. And if it's made into a movie, you can be way cooler than everyone else. And, because you read it way before it was cool, before anyone knew about it. As always, thanks for listening. And email me at booksforuspod@gmail.com if you're interested in getting my copy. Thanks again. Enjoy your week. Enjoy your fall. And yeah, love you. Bye.